Hello and welcome to the second in our short video series from NIAB EMR in East Malling, Kent in the southeast of England. My name is John Newstead, I'm Principal Soil Scientist at Delta T Devices, and I'm again delighted to introduce Dr. Mark Else, Head of Crop Science and Production Systems here at NIAB EMR. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, John. So East Malling was established in 1913 and it was set up by the growers who wanted to fund scientific research to help inform their decision making. So since then there have been many notable outputs from East Malling. Perhaps the most well known is the dwarfing series of apple rootstocks, the M series and the series. And the most widely known, of course, is M9, and M9 is used widely throughout the world now as a dwarfing rootstock for apple trees. So my area of interest is how plants interact with their environment and how we can optimise those interactions. And of course our aim is to deliver new growing systems that use resources more efficiently, produce high quality, flavoursome, phytonutritious fruit, but also of course are so resilient to climate change, are sustainable and of course economically profitable for the growers. So NIAB EMR's strapline is Science into Practice. So we're an independent research organisation, which means that we use the best sensors for a specific application. And so for us the important thing about sensors is that they're accurate, they're precise, they're reliable, and they have a reasonable longevity. One of the things we are very interested in, of course, is optimising the growing environment in order to inform decision making. And so we use lots of different sensors here in the wet centre. This one I'm holding is a wet 2 sensor, and we use this to measure the moisture content in the coir, but it also gives us a reading of the pore EC, and that's a very valuable piece of data that can help inform correct fertigation practices. And we simply just insert the probe into the coir bag and then take a reading. And we use the system then to assess the variability in the moisture content and the pore EC around the growing area to make sure we're delivering consistent fertigation. So in addition to those spot measurements using the wet sensor, we also use the Delta T SM150T sensor to make continuous measurements of changes in the coir moisture content and the pore EC. So these sensors are located in the substrate itself, in the coir, and they're sort of situated around the crop here to make sure that we're understanding how we can reduce variability in terms of water content and also pore EC. And that information is key then for us to deliver optimum fertigation on demand, and that's one of the real advantages of this system. So as well as measuring the changes in the rhizosphere, of course we're also very interested in changes in the environment within the canopy. And so things like light intensity, light quality, temperature, humidity, vapor pressure deficit, it's all important information for us to know so we can again use that information to inform our decision making. So here we're measuring air temperature and humidity with a Delta T RHT2. And here we have a QS5 that's capturing PAR. So PAR is the light that drives photosynthesis. And of course it's a photosynthesis then that drives fruit production and those quality components of the fruit. So lots of different sensors measuring different things. We must be collecting over 70,000–80,000 data points every 24 hours. So it's very important then that we can manage that data and view that data in real time. So all of this data from the sensors is sort of is collected by the GP2 data logger here. And so we can access this GP2 data logger via the cloud, we can access it via our mobile phones, we can look at a dashboard that gives us an instantaneous understanding of how conditions are changing within the crop. So having access to that real-time data is absolutely vital for us, both as scientists, but also as growers as well. So we have that sort of real-time information that can help inform those decision makings, both for the science program here, but also of course in the commercial grower sites. So last year, 2020, here in the UK was a fairly exceptional year in many respects. But in terms of the yield of the plants here in the wet centre, it was a record-breaking year. So this variety is a variety grown, bred and grown at East Malling called Malling Champion. It's an early ever bearer. It has excellent fruit size, good flavour, good shelf life, excellent disease resistance. So last year we were seeing yields here of around 1.2, 1.3 kilograms per plant, and so that's quite an exceptional yield from an early ever bearer. Interestingly though, although this environment might look fairly consistent, we always note significant differences in yield between the rows. So for example, in this row, in the centre, row 15 in this case, yields per plant were around 1.3 kilograms, whereas in this row here, they were probably around 1.1 kilograms. So these are the same plants, planted at the same time, given the same fertigation, water and fertilisers, the same pest and disease sort of regimes, yet we see an 11–12% difference in yield. And of course, we're very interested in understanding why that is. And so what we want to try and do, of course, is to make every plant as good as the best plant. So in order to understand why these rows are only 2 metres apart, why they're delivering very different yields, of course, it's very important for us to manage the growing environment, which is where we come to the sensors that we mentioned earlier, when we're tracking changes in moisture content, pore EC, air temperature, humidity, PAR, vapor pressure deficit. And so we're trying to understand how this phytoclimate in this row is different to this row. And so what we tend to see is then, even though these are only 2 metres apart, we see very clear differences in PAR. So PAR is the light that drives photosynthesis. And if you remember back to last year, certainly here in the southeast of England, PAR was absolutely exceptional. It was far higher than the 10-year average last year. So we had very warm weather, very high light intensity, good quality light, and that we think really drove yields last year, which is partly explained this high yield we got. So we think the differences in the phytoclimate that are underpinning these differences in yield most relate to PAR, and so PAR is the light wavelengths that drive photosynthesis. So we know that PAR is higher in the centre row compared to the leg row, and there's a very close correlation between class 1 yields and the amount of PAR that the plants are intercepting. So of course our challenge as scientists now is to understand how we can intervene and raise PAR in these leg rows to make sure we can improve yields across the whole of the growing area. And that's why it's important to have this access to real-time data from an array of sensors, so we can measure, manage the environment and then intervene and mitigate to really drive yields up across the whole area. So I hope you found this information today useful, and to learn more about how we're using plant science and technology and data science to really help to improve the growing environment for soft fruit production. And of course the aim is to deliver very high quality class 1 fruit, consistent yields, phytonutritious fruit, but also in a way that uses resources more efficiently.
That's great, thank you very much, Mark. It's great to hear what you and your team have achieved here, putting science into action in these commercial settings. Thank you.
You're very welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you very much for watching.